Hey, AP Eagles. Final week before the AP exam on Friday. Remember, your exam is Friday at 2 p.m. All right, that's when the test starts. We're going to go through a bunch of stuff this week to make sure you guys are prepared to log into that exam at 1:30 on Friday. Remember, you can log in a half hour before, and that will give you guys plenty of time to make sure that you can get into the test and that you're set up for the test. You're going to need some, resources next to you. Get all those things sort of laid out to make sure that when 2 o'clock hits, it's sort of full steam ahead. 45 minutes just going after that AP DBQ question, and again, it's going to feel really, really good at the end of that 45 minutes to upload your essay and submit it and know that you accomplished the goal, that you took the AP final exam. So this week is just about taking those last few steps to make sure you guys have everything you need, and that includes finishing up our AP review notebooks. We only have one topic left, and that is Unit 7. All right, now Unit 7 is the one that you guys covered at home independently, of course, with some help from me, but at home. So there is good news with this. Besides having this in your review notebooks and me creating these videos to help you guys with the questions that are outlined, remember that you guys do have note packets for this. Unlike some of the other earlier units where maybe your note packets are at school, these note packets were the ones that you guys picked up from the school at the beginning of this whole at-home thing. And you guys can keep these packets next to you as you're taking the AP exam. So if for some reason the DBQ essay is on World War I, you can actually pull out that World War I note packet that you should have at home that you already filled in, along with your review notebooks. You have all this information there, okay? So use everything you guys have access to, and let's jump in here. I want to do just 2 pages today. We're going to do pages 25 and 26. And again, we're going to go quick because these are more recent topics, so they should be kind of fresh in your mind. And again, you guys also have those note packet resources. If you were good about doing those, then you already have a good chunk of the notes and can access those to help you guys fill in your review notes. So here we go. Page 25 focuses on American imperialism. All right. The start of Unit 7, the focus is American imperialism, and more specifically, one major event, and that's the Spanish-American War. Now, that is not the only thing you need to know, though, about American imperialism. So we go to our bullet points. The first one is to describe the causes of American imperialism. Remember, in the late 1800s, the U.S. has now gone through, or is at least fully invested in the Gilded Age. All right, so American industrialization is at an all-time high. And Americans are making products faster than ever before, but also have an increased need for natural resources and raw materials. So that's where we get into our causes of imperialism, right? First cause for imperialism, need for more resources. More resources will equate to more or continued mass production of those manufactured goods that's happening in the cities during the Gilded Age. So they need more resources and more raw materials, all right? The second reason for imperialism, they want to open up more markets, more people to trade with, right? The more places that we control or have influence over around the world, those are millions and millions of people that we can try to influence to buy our products from us, okay? Other reasons for imperialism are more sort of like these philosophical reasons, right? There's things like white man's burden, right? Now, white man's burden is something that we had more contact with in global studies, but that concept could very much be used as outside information on the AP exam. The idea that it is the responsibility of Americans to go to different areas of the world and spread the blessings of liberty and democracy and equality, and we have to spread our culture to the rest of the world, right? That it's our duty or our responsibility to do that. There's also the idea of social Darwinism, right? Social Darwinism is that idea of survival of the fittest, that this is supposed to happen, that the United States has become this all-powerful country, and these super powerful countries like we are now are supposed to go out and influence weaker areas of the world. All right. Another big cause of American imperialism is the goal of sort of expanding our military presence around the world. Okay, now this is going to connect with a change in our foreign policy that we're going to talk about shortly, but we talked about this idea of development of the Great White Fleet, right? The U.S. Navy expanding at this time and trying to get military bases around the world, which will help us, again, influence these other areas of the world. Um, and I think that probably pretty much wraps it up as far as causes of American imperialism. You could put in there the goal of converting, the missionary kind of stuff where we want to spread our religious values to others of the world. That sort of would be in there as well. Okay. As far as examples of American imperialism, we already talked about Manifest Destiny. Manifest Destiny is not the same as American imperialism. All right. Manifest Destiny is sort of within North America. American imperialism, what they're really talking about is areas outside of the United States. Now, don't mistake this though. Manifest Destiny and American imperialism are very much connected. Manifest Destiny is the idea of expansion, right, within North America. But because that goal had been accomplished, the goal now becomes expansion outside of the United States. And that's where American imperialism comes from. And you guys do have examples of this. You could talk about the influence that we had in Hawaii. Remember, we helped in a revolution to overthrow the Queen of Hawaii. Our goal there was mainly economics. We knew that Hawaii had resources that could be beneficial to us. And we helped overthrow the queen, and then our economic interests were able to sort of seize control in Hawaii. Hawaii is going to be annexed in the early 1900s and eventually will become a state in the 1950s. All right, Alaska could be put in sort of that same list, except Alaska also this time period, 1860s. Alaska is going to be purchased, so not annexed, but purchased from Russia. We purchased it from Russia. Initially looks like a potential mistake. That's actually why they referred to it as Seward's Folly, because our Secretary of State Seward is the one that purchased this land from Russia. But we came to find out that Russia is going to be full of natural resources, oil, gold, those kinds of things. All right, so, and actually Alaska, very much like Hawaii, will eventually become a state in the 1950s, right? Finishing off our country in the 50 states. So you could talk about Alaska and Hawaii as examples of American imperialism. Maybe you want to talk about Japan. Now, we never gained control of Japan. We never conquered them or annexed them, but we're going to have a lot of influence in Japan starting in the 1850s. And you guys know this story from global studies. This is a story of where Matthew Perry arrives in Japan, sort of forces the Japanese to sign that Treaty of Kanagawa, opening Japan's ports, because remember they had been isolated for about 200 years. And this is an example of American imperialism because now we're going to push Japan to accept American goods and to purchase these American goods and become trade partners with the United States. China could be an example of this. This is a later example, but that open door policy in 1900, right? Open door policy created by the United States for China, but basically says that all foreign countries will have access to trade with China, that they'll have to open their doors to all foreign countries that want to trade there. So all of these are examples of just time periods or events where the United States is looking to assert its influence in different areas of the world outside of North America, right? I guess in Alaska, technically, it's still in North America, but you get it. It's a country away, Okay, so you have these examples of American imperialism. The next bullet point talks about anti-imperialists. Don't get too caught up on this, but it is a topic in the course description. You need to know that people that are anti-imperialist are against imperialism. And they believe that for a variety of reasons. Number one, they just don't think it's right. Morally, it's not right. That sovereignty and self-determination, those are good vocabulary words to use. Sovereignty and self-determination should be the right of all people and all countries. So to not be conquered and dominated and controlled by a foreign power. Anti-imperialists believe that it's not America's place to be that type of country. In a sense, it's sort of hypocritical because we were a colony at one point too and broke away. So why would anyone else want to be colonized like we had been by the British? Why should we do that to other countries? All right. There's also, of course, these criticisms of American imperialism as being, racist, as being ethnocentric, which, of course, you can absolutely make the argument that it was. Okay. So anti-imperialist, there are some famous ones, by the way, people like Mark Twain, people like William Jennings Bryan. These are anti-imperialists, people that did not like this idea. Okay, the next topic is the Spanish-American War, which does have its own heading in the course description. So this is the big event for American imperialism. Spanish-American War causes, you're going to want to focus on yellow journalism, right? We have our newspaper writers, William Randolph Hearst, Joseph Pulitzer, who had those phrases like, you furnish me the photographs and I'll furnish you the war. So I can create a war using this sort of exaggerated form of journalism, raising American nationalism and patriotism and stoking sort of those fires within Americans. Remember that Spain is in control of Cuba. They are mistreating the Cuban people. The battleship USS Maine is in Havana Harbor. There will be a malfunction on board with the boiler. It explodes. But these journalists are going to blame Spain for the sinking of that ship. And that's where we get that famous phrase of, remember the Maine and to hell with Spain. So they used yellow journalism and that sort of writing to push America into war. And remember that this is a major turning point in our foreign policy because this is the first conflict, and this is 1898, first conflict that we're going to fight in that's going to be outside of American soil. All right, so that shows a real shift from Washington's farewell address and the Monroe Doctrine that now we are going to get involved in other countries' affairs. Okay, going along with that, might as well just add in this last piece, right? During this time, as we see our foreign policy shifting, we're going to be introduced to Teddy Roosevelt's big stick diplomacy. Remember, what he believed in was having a powerful military, not necessarily as a threat to foreign countries, but letting them know that we were prepared to defend ourselves and our interests if we are pushed to that level. So it's sort of that, keep that military in the background, let people know we have it, just in case we run into any issues. All right. And Teddy Roosevelt, of course, will also be known for the creation of the Roosevelt Corollary. Remember, corollary is an addition to a previous document. So the Roosevelt Corollary is an add-on to the Monroe Doctrine. Remember, the big phrase that comes out of the Roosevelt Corollary is that idea of establishing the United States as an international police power, right? An international police force, basically declaring that now we will get involved anywhere that we believe American interests are being threatened. Now, as a side note, when we say anywhere, what Roosevelt was really focusing on was specifically Latin America. That was the area of interest where he wanted to be an international police power. But of course, this is a huge shift in our foreign policy because before we had maintained under Washington's farewell address and the Monroe Doctrine, this idea of not getting involved, right? Avoiding foreign entanglements, avoiding foreign alliances, and some people would say sort of that isolationism that we were promoting. Now we seem to want to be fully invested and fully involved, okay? That takes care of page 25. Let's just quickly do page 26, and then we're sort of set for the day here. I'll post the last video for the week tomorrow. Page 26 is World War I, causes of U.S. entry into World War I. Now, guys, don't get confused with that. It's not saying what were the causes of World War I. That's global studies. That's world history. You need to know why the U.S. eventually gets involved. Remember, we declare ourselves to be neutral at the beginning of the war under Woodrow Wilson. But there will be a series of events that take place that sort of start to slowly drag us into this conflict. One of them is the sinking of the Lusitania. All right. The other big one is that Zimmerman telegram, right? That Zimmerman note where Germany is trying to form this secret alliance with Mexico. They would have attacked us under this plan, preoccupying the United States so Germany could win the war in Europe. And then Germany would come back or come over here and help Mexico defeat the United States and regain the land that Mexico had lost in the Mexican-American War, that Mexican cession, right, that territory. Actually, Britain intercepts this telegram, gives it to us. We see it as an act of war, and that's what eventually pulls us into World War I. As far as government policies during World War I, you need to remember that all of our actions are sort of examples of that concept that during times of war, during a time of national crisis, the federal government will oftentimes exceed its normal powers, right? We can do that under the elastic clause, that the government can do whatever is necessary and proper at any given time of crisis. And you will see actions that show this increased power of the federal government. The draft is going to come back, right? For the second time in U.S. history, they will resort to a draft to make sure that we have enough people in the U.S. military to help win this war. So you can talk about conscription again, all right? You can talk about some of those add-ons to the government, those new departments, things like the War Industries Board, things like the Food Administration, right? Because during World War I, we're going to see things like rationing of food. We're going to see things like Liberty bonds. Remember, there's going to also be propaganda being put out during World War I, created by the government to try to promote patriotism and support for the war. So these are all actions that you'd list under the federal government power increasing during this conflict. Okay, now speaking of that, don't forget that famous court case too. This is a nice detail if you got an essay about World War I and changing government power. Schenck versus the United States, right? Schenck versus the United States was the court case where the man is distributing anti-draft and anti-war information in these pamphlets. He is arrested. He claims freedom of speech under the First Amendment, but he will be found guilty by the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court will declare that by spreading this anti-draft and anti-war information, he is creating a clear and present danger. Remember, that's the phrase to remember for this case, a clear and present danger to the American people, to the nation, to the war effort, okay? And during these times of crisis, if your actions create a clear and present danger, your civil liberties can be limited by the federal government. And that's what this court case proves. All right, finish up, last couple topics. Don't forget that the Great Migration is sort of a social change that's taking place during World War I. For the first time since the end of the Civil War, a massive migration of African Americans from the South, mainly to northern cities, places like Detroit, Chicago, New York, Boston, those areas. Remember that because the war had started and we have troops going overseas, there will be job opportunities in northern factories. Women will fill these job opportunities, right? And that will help eventually lead to the passing of the 19th Amendment in 1920. Giving women the right to vote, right? Women's suffrage. But also, these job openings are an opportunity for African Americans, many of which had never left the South after the Civil War, many of which had become sharecroppers after the Civil War because there just weren't the opportunities to get out of the South. Now there are. Because these troops are overseas, there are economic opportunities in northern cities, and many African Americans will move there. Now, there will be social implications of this. What you have are northern cities seeing millions of African Americans moving to these areas all at sort of the same time. And it does create, in some cases, a social and cultural conflict. There will be sort of racism will start to develop in some of these cities. You will start to see cities becoming more segregated, white portions of cities and black portions of cities and so on. So there is going to be some cultural conflicts here as well. Finally, guys, the last part, as the war ends, remember Woodrow Wilson does have a plan for peace. His plan was known as the 14 points. The goal of the 14 points was to create a lasting peace in Europe. Remember, he had a bunch of ideas there, including demilitarization, including self-determination, including freedom of the seas, all these different ideas in those 14 points. Unfortunately for him, Britain and France aren't interested in creating a lasting peace. They're interested in punishing Germany. So most of Wilson's 14 points will be thrown to the side. The only one that sticks is going to be the League of Nations. All right. And instead, for the Treaty of Versailles, for that description, you guys know that the goal is to punish Germany. That's what Britain and France decide. You guys know the examples, the reparations, the demilitarization of the German military, the loss of colonies, the war guilt clause, right? All those things. The treaty is finished. Woodrow Wilson brings it back to Congress, asks them to sign the treaty and be the first country to join the League of Nations. And Congress says no, right? Because not only do we not agree with the Treaty of Versailles, Congress believes that we will ultimately have to be one of the countries that enforces it. And we are not interested in monitoring other countries after World War I. We want to be more isolated, focus more on ourselves. So the idea of trying to monitor Germany to make sure they're following those ideas in the Treaty of Versailles was just not something we were interested in. And the League of Nations fits exactly with that same idea. The concept of the League of Nations is that countries will work together to solve problems, right? International cooperation, which sounds like this beautiful concept, but what Congress sees it as at this time is the U.S. having to be interventionists, having to intervene in other countries' affairs and conflicts and issues. And after World War I, we don't want to do that anymore. We're going to revert back to our old foreign policy of isolationism, of minding our own business, of staying out of European entanglements. So we never joined the League of Nations. The League of Nations ultimately will become powerless and, of course, will not be able to prevent what eventually comes about 20 years down the road in the form of World War II. But we'll talk more about our foreign policy after World War I as we get to page 29 in our review notebooks, the last page for you guys. Okay, that takes care of today's video. Tomorrow we will do those last 3 pages and finish off these review notebooks. At that point, you guys have the resource to study and prepare and look over and practice essays and all that kind of stuff. Remember to take care of yourselves this week. Be smart about how you spend your time. Make AP US history a priority. All right. A lot of other things can sort of wait until after Friday. But make sure that you guys are also taking care of yourself, mentally and physically. Get your sleep this week. Don't overdo it, but, sort of systematically, right? In a structured way. Make sure you guys are using your time the right way and getting yourself ready for this test on Friday. All right. And I'll be checking in with you guys. Hope all is well with you and you had a great weekend. And we will talk to you guys tomorrow.